Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a question that, well, likely crosses everyone's mind sometimes when looking at politics. Why do some candidates who seem, let's say, ill-equipped to govern actually win elections?
Right.
We're going to unpack this often frustrating paradox, the gap between being good at campaigning and being good at governing.
Exactly.
Our mission isn't just to point it out, but to understand its roots. The psychological stuff at play for everyone involved, candidates and voters, and the strategies that lead to victory, even when governing seems like an afterthought.
Precisely. And this isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's more about getting a much deeper understanding of this recurring tension you see in democratic systems. We've looked at a variety of sources for this, but our main focus today will be drawing insights from a report called AI on Leadership Challenges and Democratic Stability.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, it provides a really compelling kind of interdisciplinary look at this exact issue, that disconnect between what helps someone win votes and what's actually needed to govern effectively.
And for you, our listener.
Well, for you, we hope to provide a clear framework for understanding this persistent challenge. Maybe offer some real aha moments without getting, bogged down in overly academic jargon.
Okay, good. So let's dive right in then. What exactly is this paradox when we talk about winning versus governing?
It boils down to this fundamental tension, really. The skills that make someone a successful political campaigner. They're often quite different from the skills you need for effective governance.
How so?
Well, winning an election often relies on being able to mobilize support, craft persuasive narratives, often pretty emotionally charged ones, actually, projecting a strong personal image, and sometimes, frankly, using divisive rhetoric to really energize a base.
Yeah, get your side out.
Exactly. Governing, though, that demands different things, like policy expertise, the ability to negotiate, to find common ground, having a long-term vision, respecting institutions. Totally. The concerning pattern we're digging into is when leaders are brilliant at those campaign skills, willing to say and do anything to win, as the saying goes, but then they just lack the core abilities, or maybe even the desire, to govern responsibly once they're in office.
It definitely feels like such a modern problem, doesn't it, with the 24/7 news, social media?
It does feel that way, but this isn't actually new. Not at all.
Really?
Yeah, the report we're focusing on makes it clear this tension has really deep historical roots. You can go way back.
Yeah.
Think about someone like Cleon of Athens, ancient Greece.
Cleon. Yeah.
He was known for his powerful appeal to the common man, very populist style, and a kind of disregard for elite traditions. Helped him rise to power, sure.
Yeah.
But historical accounts also suggest his leadership had some, let's say, significant downsides when it came to actual governing. And the report argues this pattern isn't limited to certain governments or cultures. You see echoes of it across different time periods, different political systems. It suggests there's some pretty fundamental underlying causes at work here.
Okay, so if it's this long-standing, universal-ish problem, how do we even start to get our heads around it? It feels so complex.
You're right, it is complex. And that's exactly why the interdisciplinary approach the report talks about is so important. No single field has all the answers.
Makes sense.
We need to pull insights from, a whole range of areas.
Yeah.
Evolutionary psychology, for instance, helps us understand that basic human drive for status.
Right.
And how that fuels political ambition. Neurobiology sheds light on the brain mechanisms, motivation, competition, social cues. Then you've got cognitive and social psychology looking at voter biases, emotions, how we process messages.
The voter side of things.
Exactly. Political science, obviously, analyzes campaign strategies, political systems. History gives us context. Case studies.
Okay.
Even feels like complex systems theory, logic. They offer ways to understand how beliefs spread, how strategic interactions play out.
Yeah.
And looking forward, the report also digs into the role of AI, both good and bad.
Wow, okay, so it's pulling from everywhere.
Pretty much. The takeaway is that our electoral systems, while designed to give legitimacy through votes, can sometimes, maybe inadvertently, select for traits that are great for winning, but actually damaging when it comes to governing well.
That's a crucial point. Let's dig into some of those deeper drivers then. The report mentions evolutionary roots, this idea of primal drive. What's that about?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It connects political ambition back to our very basic, evolutionarily wired drive for status in social hierarchies.
Like pecking orders.
Kinda, yeah. And it's not just humans. You see this in lots of social species. Evolutionarily speaking, higher status means better access to resources, better survival chances, more reproductive opportunities.
The fundamentals.
Exactly. And it seems humans are just inherently tuned in to status cues, figuring out where we fit. It starts really early in life.
So that urge to climb the ladder fuels the desire to be a leader.
That's the idea. Evolutionary psychologists argue this drive for status, maybe especially in males historically, was strongly linked to reproductive success.
Ah,
In many species, including ours, males often compete more intensely for mates because their reproductive output can vary more widely. High status often directly meant more mating opportunities.
right.
Plus, higher status folks could often help their relatives more, which boosts what they call inclusive fitness. So, competition, even aggressive competition, became a way to signal and achieve that status.
But the report mentioned two paths to status, dominance and prestige.
Yes, and this is a really key distinction. Dominance is about status through force, intimidation, coercion, making others comply through fear or pressure.
Got it.
Prestige, on the other hand, is earned. It comes from demonstrating skill, knowledge, expertise, success, behaving in ways that benefit the group. Others then freely give you respect and deference.
So respect versus fear, basically.
In a way, yes. And while dominance can work, especially short-term, research suggests people generally prefer prestige-based leaders. Those they trust, respect for their abilities, who lead by example. There's also a perception, maybe a stereotype, that men might lean more towards dominance strategies, women towards prestige. But of course, anyone can use either approach.
And how does this link back to unqualified leaders?
The concern is that their success might come from tapping into that dominance pathway, especially in times of perceived threat or crisis, when an aggressive, decisive-sounding leader, even if not competent, might seem appealing.
Right, someone who seems strong.
Exactly. So you can see political ambition as this fundamental drive to get ahead, using either dominance or prestige as the vehicle.
That makes a lot of sense. Projecting strength can win votes, even if the substance isn't there. But what's happening in our brains that makes us fall for this?
Well, this drive for status, the urge to compete, it's not just abstract. It's wired into our brain circuitry.
Okay.
There's a whole network involved: the amygdala, processing emotions like fear, the hippocampus for memory, the striatum, key for reward, parts of the prefrontal cortex for higher-level social reasoning.
So it's complex.
Definitely. And feeling dominant is also linked to a sense of control in the brain.
And neurotransmitters, those brain chemicals must be involved too.
Absolutely. Dopamine and serotonin are big players in navigating social hierarchies. Dopamine especially is central to the brain's reward system.
The feel-good chemical.
Well, it's more about motivation and reinforcement than just pleasure. It drives us towards things that help us survive and reproduce, rewards us for achieving goals.
Okay.
Now, think about a political campaign. It's full of these intermittent rewards, right? Good poll numbers, winning a primary, a big cheering crowd. These things can powerfully activate that dopamine system. The pursuit of victory itself, constantly getting those dopamine hits, can almost become the main goal. It might overshadow the actual job of governing.
Wow.
It gives us a potential neurobiological basis for that win for the sake of winning mentality.
That's slightly alarming. Like campaigning could become addictive.
In a manner of speaking, yes. And there's more. Changes in social status, especially losing status if you're dominant, have real neurobiological effects.
Like what?
Animal studies show downward shifts are super stressful. Changes in stress hormones, even gene expression in the brain. Dominant animals show different brain activity, more sensitivity to their social world.
So losing power feels really bad biologically.
Extremely. That intense stress could be a powerful motivator to cling to power by any means necessary, even unethical ones. It's like loss aversion layered onto that reward-seeking. Hormones like testosterone also influence dominance behaviors.
Okay, so we've got the leader's internal drives. But why do voters go for these candidates sometimes? What's happening in our minds?
Right, this brings us to cognitive and social psychology. The report really emphasizes that the ideal of the perfectly informed voter, carefully weighing every policy. Well, it doesn't often match reality.
No kidding.
Most of us have limited time, limited information, and we're just bombarded. So, to cope, we use mental shortcuts. Heuristics.
Rules of thumb.
Exactly. They help us make quick judgments, but they also introduce biases, make us vulnerable.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A really common one is the representativeness heuristic. We judge something based on how well it fits our mental prototype.
Okay.
So, in politics, a voter might judge a candidate's competence not on their record, but on how well they look or sound, like the voter's idea of a leader. Appearance, confidence, demeanor.
Superficial stuff.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
We subconsciously equate the presentation of leadership, that confidence, maybe a certain look, with actual competence. Savvy but unqualified candidates can totally exploit this. Looking trustworthy isn't the same as being trustworthy.
Judging a book by its cover.
That's a perfect analogy. And there are others. Fast and frugal heuristics, using minimal info, or just going with your gut.
Right.
These prioritize cognitive ease over deep analysis, which makes us susceptible to image crafting, stereotype triggering.
And campaigns know this.
Oh, absolutely. They can exploit other biases too, like the anchoring effect, the first piece of info sticking disproportionately, or priming exposing us to symbols or words to subtly influence perception. Our own efficiency mechanisms create these vulnerabilities.
It's not just thinking, though. Emotions are huge in politics, right?
Huge. The report stresses political decisions are rarely purely logical. Emotion often dominates reason. You hear that phrase, when reason and emotion collide, emotion invariably wins. That's often true in politics.
Yeah.
Rhetoric is often designed specifically to tap into emotions, fear, anger, hope, patriotism, because that's what persuades and mobilizes. Interestingly, research suggests politicians feeling weaker, or those with more extreme views, might lean even more heavily on emotional language. Emotions give immediate motivation. Logic takes effort.
And what about storytelling? We hear about the power of narrative.
That's narrative persuasion. Stories pull us in emotionally.
Yeah.
When we're absorbed in a narrative, we tend to lower our critical defenses, generate fewer counter-arguments. By creating characters we identify with, evoking empathy, stories shape attitudes powerfully, sometimes more than just facts. Even short anecdotes work. Skilled storytellers connect deeply, potentially bypassing critical evaluation.
And our identities seem so wrapped up in politics now. How does that play in?
That's crucial. The expressive model of partisanship suggests many voters align with parties less for policy benefits and more because it's part of their social identity.
Oh, they are.
Exactly. Shared values, culture, religion, whatever. Voting becomes an act of expressing group loyalty, belonging. This us versus them mentality makes us super receptive to messages reinforcing our group and denigrating the other side, often regardless of facts.
So once we pick a team, our objectivity goes out the window.
It gets much harder, definitely, which leads to things like motivated reasoning and confirmation bias.
Okay, explain those.
Confirmation bias is our tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. We ignore or downplay contradictory stuff. We choose news sources that agree with us, read ambiguous info in a favorable light.
We see what we want to see.
Pretty much. Motivated reasoning is slightly different. It's driven by the desire to reach conclusions that fit our broader goals, especially protecting our social identity.
So, defending our team.
Right. If your preferred candidate says something controversial, motivated reasoning pushes you to find ways to defend it, even if it's flawed, to stay aligned with your group. We evaluate facts based on how they fit our group's position, not just objectively. The motivation is belonging, not just consistency. That's why fact-checking often fails, especially if it challenges core identity.
And even when facts do disprove something, we still cling to it sometimes.
That's belief perseverance. Sticking to initial beliefs even after the evidence is debunked. Sometimes conflicting evidence can even strengthen the original belief, the backfire effect.
Wow.
Fact-checking might have a temporary effect, but beliefs can snap back.
It sounds like we're all pretty vulnerable. Is everyone equally susceptible, though?
No, definitely not. Susceptibility varies. Cognitive factors matter. Lower analytical thinking skills might make it harder to spot falsehoods. Our emotional state is huge. Fear, anger, they cloud judgment, make us rely more on those gut feelings. Even positive moods can sometimes impair judgment.
Really?
Yeah. Familiarity is another trick. The more we hear something, the truer it feels. The illusory truth effect. And partisan bias is massive, obviously. Plus, individual differences matter. Tendencies towards conspiracy thinking, narcissism, low social trust, a high need for simple answers, all linked to being more susceptible.
What about charisma? That classic leadership trait. How does that work psychologically?
Charisma, that perceived gift of grace Weber talked about, inspires intense loyalty, emotional connection.
Right.
From a social identity view, charismatic leaders often seem like the perfect embodiment of the group, its values, beliefs, norms. Identifying with them boosts our own self-esteem. This
Oh,
leads to psychological effects,
right.
attributing great power to the leader, liking them intensely, maybe imitating them, committing to the group's goals, feeling shared emotions with other followers. Sometimes this intense bond makes us overlook or rationalize their negative actions.
But charisma has a dark side, right?
Yeah.
It can be misused.
Absolutely. Because it bypasses rationality for emotion and identity, it's a powerful tool for manipulation. Followers might stop thinking critically.
Mm.
Leaders can become narcissistic, followers overly dependent. History is full of examples, both good and bad. Think Martin Luther King Jr. versus Hitler.
Big difference.
Huge. And today's media landscape, with rapid information spread and targeted emotional appeals, can amplify this dynamic, creating echo chambers around captivating but maybe unqualified figures. Remember, leadership is reciprocal. Follower needs shape that charismatic bond.
Okay, so we've covered leader motivations and voter psychology. Now let's talk tactics. What's in the playbook for these win-at-all-costs types?
They often use a pretty predictable set of strategies, designed to fire up their base, make opponents seem illegitimate, and bypass critical thinking by hitting those emotional and identity buttons we talked about.
Like populist rhetoric. We hear that term constantly. What is it exactly?
Populist rhetoric is a very common strategy, especially for outsider candidates. Its core move is dividing society starkly. The pure people versus the corrupt elite.
Us versus them.
Exactly. It claims politics should reflect the people's true will, but that will is blocked by a self-serving elite. It's anti-establishment, often dismissive of diverse interests within the people.
And right-wing populism specifically.
Often defines the people in narrower, maybe nationalist or cultural terms, portrays them as threatened by outsiders, immigrants maybe, or by elites betraying the nation.
What are the specific techniques used in this rhetoric?
Several key ones pop up again and again,
Yeah.
constantly hammering that people versus elite contrast. Creating a crisis narrative, society's collapsing, we're under threat, creates urgency. Nostalgic appeals, romanticizing a lost golden age.
Yeah.
Using simple, highly emotional language, connecting via anger or fear. Not complex policy.
Right.
And sometimes intentionally gimmicky. Performing bad manners, breaking political norms to seem authentic, not part of the elite. It's often used strategically, during campaigns or when approval dips. It's adaptable for rallying people around grievances. We see examples everywhere.
So beyond that general populist frame, are there more specific manipulation tactics used?
Oh, definitely. These campaigns often target those cognitive vulnerabilities directly. Goal is psychological influence, not reasoned debate.
How?
Feeding supporters confirming info.
Right.
Anchoring on misleading stats. Priming with symbols, good ones for them, bad for opponents.
Right.
Exploiting our tendency to think we're good at spotting lies.
Can you give concrete examples?
Sure. Disinformation, intentionally spreading false info to deceive. Like the fire hose of falsehood strategy, just overwhelm people with so many lies they don't know what to believe. Scapegoating, blaming complex problems on marginalized groups. Creating false urgency or scarcity to rush decisions. Exploiting authority bias. Trusting fake experts. Maybe the foot in the door technique, get agreement on small things, then bigger controversial ones. And of course, tons of logical fallacies, bad arguments that sound good.
And AI is making this worse.
Yes, that's a huge concern in the report. AI can generate massive amounts of disinformation cheaply and quickly, create realistic deepfakes video, audio, micro-target manipulative messages to individuals based on their data.
Wow.
It makes propaganda way more personalized, potentially far more effective. The worry is this AI-amplified manipulation bypasses rational thought, exploits our weak spots, and it thrives in polarized environments.
We also see so much negative campaigning. What's the strategy behind that?
Negative campaigning attacking opponents on their record, character, personal life, often emotionally, is super common, but its effectiveness is actually debated.
Oh.
Research shows it can lower evaluations of the target, but it risks backfiring, making the attacker look bad, unfair, especially if they started or the attack seemed baseless.
Right.
Its impact on turnout is also murky, and strong partisans might hear negative stuff about their candidate, but vote for them anyway.
So it's a gamble.
It's a complex strategic calculation, weighing the benefit of damaging the opponent versus damaging yourself. Even trickier in multi-candidate races, attacking one might help another candidate who stays clean. Risky, but defining opponents negatively early on is often seen as worth the risk.
And the report uses specific case studies.
Yeah, it looks at several contemporary examples. Trump's rise, for instance, linked to populist rhetoric, crisis narratives, simple language, scapegoating, the fire hose of falsehood. Bolsonaro in Brazil, attacking the voting system, normalizing disinformation. the Brexit campaign's widespread misinformation. These cases really illustrate how populism, manipulation, exploiting divisions, and cognitive vulnerabilities are central to the playbook of winning, sometimes overgoverning.
Okay, so it's not just the candidates and their tactics. The environment they operate in matters too, right?
Absolutely. The success of these leaders often happens in specific contexts. Times of crisis, economic, social, political, are breeding grounds. Populists offer simple solutions, blame outgroups. High polarization makes us versus them narratives potent. Partisans lap up confirming info, reject opposing views,
Yeah.
and eroding trust in institutions, government, parties, media creates a vacuum. Alternative narratives, anti-establishment figures claiming to speak truth against elite lies, gain traction.
It's a feedback loop.
A really dangerous one. Crises and polarization fuel populism, which then deepens divisions and erodes trust further, reinforcing the conditions that allowed it in the first place.
And the political systems themselves, can they contribute?
Yes, definitely. System design matters. Systems heavy on political appointments, for example, can suffer if loyalty trumps expertise. Weak or captured democratic institutions, courts, election bodies, a free press can't hold leaders accountable effectively. That opens the door for incompetent or authoritarian types. This erosion can be gradual, stealth authoritarianism. Cultural context also plays a role. Different expectations of leaders, communication styles, basis of trust, and systemic biases exist, like scapegoating minority leaders during crises. It's broader than just individuals. It's about exploitable structural features, too.
This all raises some deep ethical questions, doesn't it? If the focus is just winning, what about responsibility?
It absolutely does. The report goes into the ethical implications. The whole idea of a social contract is based on consent to be governed in return for protection, order.
Right.
When leaders prioritize only winning, ignoring the duty to govern ethically and effectively, arguably that's a breach of that contract. Election wins, grant legitimacy, sure, but it's conditional on fulfilling those governing obligations.
So it's a betrayal of trust.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Betrays trust, undermines the whole point of political community, mutual benefit, security.
So what does ethical leadership look like in this context?
The report emphasizes integrity as the foundation. Honesty, transparency, accountability, sticking to ethical principles even when it's hard politically. Prioritizing the public good over self-interest or party interest. Taking responsibility. Some philosophies even see public office as a kind of sacrifice for the common good. Lack of integrity just corrodes trust, weakens institutions.
And what about truthfulness and competence? How do they fit ethically?
Truthfulness is non-negotiable for ethical political communication. Leaders have a moral duty to be accurate so citizens can make informed decisions. Deliberate lies undermine democracy itself.
Right.
Ethical persuasion uses reason and evidence, not deception. And competence itself is an ethical dimension. Governing requires skill, knowledge, judgment. Seeking office without the ability, or not cultivating it, is arguably an ethical failure. It violates public trust, the duty to manage collective welfare. Justice-based leadership includes competence.
It seems like a fine line between persuasion, which is part of politics, and unethical manipulation. How do we draw it?
That's a crucial but often really blurry line. Politics involves persuasion, advocating, mobilizing.
Sure.
Unethical manipulation crosses the line with deception, exploiting emotions or biases cynically, suppressing dissent, prioritizing partisan gain over public good or truth. Propaganda often uses falsehoods, simplistic narratives, irrational appeals.
So intent matters.
Intent is key. Is the goal to inform or deceive? Is there respect for the audience's ability to reason or an attempt to overwhelm it? Is there a commitment to truth? Modern tech like AI, micro-targeting, deepfakes, it makes this even harder. We desperately need transparency, accountability, strong ethical frameworks. The difficulty in drawing that clear line highlights the ongoing challenge.
The report also mentions more formal ways to analyze these dynamics, like game theory and network effects.
Yeah, these offer structured ways to look at the strategic interactions and belief spread. Game theory uses math to analyze situations where outcomes depend on everyone's choices.
Like political campaigns as games.
Exactly. Campaigns, negotiations, debates, you have players, strategies, payoffs, information, equilibrium points.
Like the prisoner's dilemma, where rational individual choices lead to a worse outcome for everyone.
Precisely. In campaigns, negative ads might seem rational for one candidate, regardless of the opponent. But if both attack, the overall discourse suffers. Trust drops, a suboptimal outcome for the system.
Right.
Game theory helps analyze decisions on policy stances, resource allocation, attack ads weighing gains versus risks, impact on other candidates. Tactics that seem unethical might look rational purely from a winning perspective.
And network effects, how do they fit?
That looks at how beliefs, opinions, behaviors spread through networks online, offline. Belief propagation models calculate how likely someone is to hold a belief based on their connections.
Okay.
Opinion dynamics models add psychological factors.
Oh.
Homophily, we connect with similar people. Confirmation bias. Bounded confidence, we're mostly influenced by people already close to our views.
Which leads to echo chambers.
Exactly. Echo chambers, filter bubbles. Network structure matters to clusters. Influential hubs speed up polarization and belief spread, both true and false. Some models include stubborn agents with fixed beliefs anchoring parts of the network. These models show how connections and psychology drive polarization and misinformation, sometimes regardless of information quality.
And finally, the report mentions identifying flawed reasoning, logical fallacies.
Yeah, recognizing logical fallacies is crucial for critical thinking, a defense against manipulation. Fallacies are reasoning errors that make arguments seem persuasive but are logically unsound.
Like attacking the person, not the argument.
That's ad hominem, a classic. Others include strawman misrepresenting the opponent's view, red herring introducing irrelevant distractions. They work by appealing to emotion, exploiting biases, confusing people. Understanding these helps us see through misleading rhetoric.
So pulling this together, what are the real-world consequences when unqualified leaders gain power?
The consequences are serious and wide-ranging. You often see a direct hit to governance effectiveness, leading to policy failures.
How so?
Leaders lacking skills or temperament struggle with managing complexity, making sound decisions, building consensus. This translates to poorer government performance, short-term focus over long-term needs, general inefficiency, stagnation.
And beyond policy.
A major consequence is the corrosion of public trust and social cohesion. Democratic governance needs trust. Incompetence, self-dealing, dishonesty, unfairness, they all erode that trust. Divisive us versus them rhetoric damages cohesion, deepens polarization, often deliberately. This fragments society, makes dialogue harder, reduces cooperation. It weakens trust both vertically citizens to government and horizontally among citizens. And governance failures feed distrust, that vicious cycle again.
And the long-term threats.
Perhaps the most concerning is the enduring threat to democratic norms and institutions. Anti-democratic leaders might actively undermine checks and balances, attack courts, restrict media, politicize the civil service or law enforcement, spread election disinformation, suppress opposition, violate norms.
It can be subtle.
Often very incremental, yes. Democratic backsliding. Each violation sets a precedent, lowers resistance, long-term risk, consolidation of power, silencing dissent, transforming into what's called electoral authoritarianism.
The report also looks at AI as a potential intervention. What are the possibilities there?
AI does offer some interesting potential upsides. Educational AI tools, for example, could help people boost media literacy, critical thinking, by helping analyze sources, identify bias, understand algorithms, simulate political messages, provide personalized feedback.
But there are big caveats.
Huge ones. AI is definitely a double-edged sword. First, bias. AI learns from data, and if the data has societal biases, gender, race, politics, the AI can amplify them.
Okay.
Second, manipulation. AI provides powerful tools for manipulation. Generative AI creating deepfakes, targeted propaganda cheaply and at scale. The speed might just overwhelm detection efforts. This makes explainable AI, or XAI, critical. We need to understand how AI makes decisions, especially for things like fact-checking or content moderation. Without transparency, AI tools could be unreliable, even harmful. XAI techniques help build trust, enable oversight, spot errors.
So we need ethical rules for AI in politics.
Absolutely. Robust ethical frameworks aligned with democratic values.
Right.
Human rights, fairness, transparency, accountability, safety, privacy, human oversight.
Sounds challenging.
It is. Defining fairness in politics is hard. There's a risk AI just amplifies polarization, creates better echo chambers. Drawing the line between persuasion and manipulation with AI is tough.
But AI could potentially help mitigate polarization.
Potentially, yes. By exposing people to diverse views, maybe facilitating dialogue, countering polarizing language, but it needs very careful ethical design. Tech solutions like blockchain for media authenticity might help too. It requires dialogue, governance, commitment to ethics.
Okay, so to wrap this all up, we've covered a huge amount of ground.
We really have. We've seen how the rise of seemingly unqualified leaders stems from this complex mix. Our basic evolutionary drives, voter psychology with its shortcuts and emotions, leader strategies like populism and manipulation, and the enabling environments of crisis, polarization, and weak institutions.
Right.
And we've looked at the serious weaker governance, falling trust, threats to democracy itself, plus the double-edged potential of AI in all of this.
And beyond AI, what else is needed to tackle this?
Well, it's got to be multifaceted, strengthening citizen capabilities, civic education, media literacy, AI literacy too, institutional reform, strengthening checks and balances, judicial independence, press freedom, maybe campaign finance reform, greater responsibility from the media ecosystem, and fostering more constructive, less polarized public discourse somehow. Ultimately, it's about building a political culture that genuinely values competence, integrity, and a real commitment to the public good.
So for you, listening in as you process all this, maybe think about how you can use these insights, how you can be more critical of the political information you see, engage more thoughtfully. Because leadership, well, it's got to be about more than just winning, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
It's fundamentally about governing responsibly, effectively, ethically for everyone. So maybe consider this. What role do you think individual citizens play in shifting that cultural emphasis towards really valuing those essential qualities in our leaders? Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.
This is DigitView.